My background is in health and nutrition. I've studied nutrition and worked with a number of the major nutritionists around the world for over 45 years now. One of the things that came in that made all the difference in the world in my consulting company, Health Quest International, which we do nutritional support and prevention of disease consulting, was when I was introduced to the Enagic machine. I had studied electrolyzed reduced water prior to it, but the only machines that at the time I was studying it were available were the knockoff machines coming out of Korea, so I didn't bother to deal with them. And then when I found the Enagic machine, then I got it. And the difference that it has made in our ability to help people overcome some of their issues because we get the body in balance with the water has made all the difference in the world. Um, One of the things Wade asked me to talk about today was the difference between our machine, the Enagic machine, and those knockoffs. And we have to understand that there's a company in China and one in Korea, South Korea, I'm sorry, um, with the quality of what they make, maybe it should be coming out of North Korea. uh, Anyway, uh, they make parts basically, and any individual can get a contract with them and they will build a machine for them, or they will send them the parts and allow them to put them together here in the US. Um, but they're all basically the same. They're all using the same processes and materials. And it's the materials that really make the difference. Um, and then they all compare themselves to who? Enagic. Why? Because we're the key on the market and they use their weaknesses, which we will talk about, to try to fool people because most people don't understand how all of this works. So they use it, and we'll talk about some of those things that I've seen them use in advertising to individuals who have either had one of their machines, because I know some of people down here in Louisiana were leasing the machines to people on kind of a lease to buy at the end program. Um, and when they decided not to buy it, the things that they would email them and send them are all the same things that they constantly talk about. So the materials in the machine are the critical aspect of it. Um, and we can start with, and wait, if you have a question in somewhere in between, if I'm going off of what you were looking for me to talk about, please jump in and let me know. Um, when you start looking at the materials and the manufacturing cost and the marketing plan that Enagic uses and how that all fits into the price, it it's all the things that they try to use to tell people why our machine's so expensive, which is just the opposite of what is actually true. For example, our plates, um, they're solid plates. All of theirs are perforated. They call them mesh plates. They have little holes in them. Here's the main problem with that. When you drive enough electricity to actually uh, reposition the molecules and adjust those molecules in the water to electrolyze the water, what you're doing is driving electrons into it to fill the valence shells of all of the different elements in the water to begin to separate them so that they don't cluster together trying to share electrons. If you drive enough power to do that through a mesh plate, you will arc across the little holes in the mesh and dissolve the plate. It's like welding. It'll just eat the plate alive. So they talk about, well, the surface area, because with the holes, you've got the interior of the donut hole as considered surface area. But if you don't drive enough power through it, it doesn't matter because it doesn't make any electrolyte or very little electrolyzed reduced water. So that's one of the big issues. The other thing is that using medical grade material, platinum and titanium, is a critical aspect of this because um, Medical grade means it's pure to 99.9 to the fourth power. It doesn't have other alloy metals in it. And why is that so critical? Because number one, titanium is used as the base of the plate because it is an excellent transmission of electrons. It doesn't hold them. It allows the electrons to flow through the metal. Probably the only other metal that would do as good or maybe a slight bit better would be pure gold. Um, but pure gold is so soft, you couldn't even make, forget the price, you couldn't even make the plates out of pure gold. You'd have to alloy the gold to make it hard enough, whereas titanium is quite hard and it doesn't change. If you're driving a lot of power through that titanium and it's got other metals in it, tin, copper, shred, all of the different things that could be alloys, they start absorbing the electrons because they do not conduct the electricity as well. And they begin to heat up. And so that brings us to why they use a switch mode power supply, because as the electrons start going through and heating the plate up, if they didn't shut the power off, it would just melt in the spots where those alloys are. So they have a switch in there that recognizes the temperature, and as the plate heats up, it turns off. It switch, that's what they're referring to as switch mode. It turns off until the water that's passing over the plates cool the plate down enough for it to come back on. Well, guess what? It's not doing anything when the switch is off. And if you look at the timing, it's off about 85% of the time. So it's useless. Now, how do they compensate for that? By putting what they call the second filter in, because, and that's how they publish. Oh, Enagic only has one filter. We have two filters. We do a better job of filtering the water. Well, guess what the second filter is? It's a remineralizing filter, because when the power's off and there's no electricity running through the plate, then it would not change the pH or anything else of the water flowing through it. So they dump elemental minerals in it to raise the pH so that when they test it with the drops, it still shows that its pH has gone up. But what is the big problem with drinking? And this is what doctors will tell you all the time: be very careful drinking alkaline water, because the way people make alkaline water, the other than electrolysis, the only other way to produce alkaline water is to increase the mineral content, the alkalizing minerals, but they're all elemental. And our bodies cannot absorb and use elemental minerals. They don't have a mechanism to get them back out of the body, so they start storing them, and they can cause all kinds of problems. In addition to the fact that it's still positively charged, so it doesn't enter the cell, it doesn't get into the cells, it doesn't hydrate the cells, none of the things that we're looking for the water to actually accomplish. But yet they're going to use, oh, we have two filters. Yeah, well, we don't care because the mineralizing filter is hurting us. It's not helping us. The plate thing, by not using the medical grade material, the cost is far lower. I mean, the cost of just the metal that goes into our machines on an SD501, a 7-plate machine, is about $1,500 an ounce. I've been in aviation for years also, and a lot of the parts that we are required to have if you're building airplanes has to be certain quality grades. If you looked at medical grade metal, if we took a bolt that you can go down to the hardware store and buy out of stainless steel for about $1.50, if it was made from medical grade stainless steel, it would cost you about $250. That's the difference in what it takes to produce that pure of a metal. So it's critically important. We can drive the 230, 240 watts of power through our machine to do actual electrolysis on a consistent basis. And because we're using medical grade materials, there's no alloys in the metal. It doesn't heat up, and we electrolyze constantly and at a power level that gives us stable water. So it'll last for a few days. It'll begin to degrade and go back to its natural state because the electrons start getting oxidized back out. But it's strong for a long time. I've tested waters coming off these knockoff machines, and the little bit of ORP that they do have, and especially if you run the water immediately before the plate starts to heat up, you'll actually get a little bit of electrolyzed reduced water, and that's what they want to use to show you you're there testing. It'll begin to fall off in about 10 minutes. I've sat there and tested it in over an hour, and from 5 to 10 minutes after producing the water to the hour, it is completely positive. And it's because they couldn't put enough power through it to actually disassociate the molecules properly. So that's a critical part. They want to say that their plates are better because they're mesh. It's just the opposite. Um, they want to say that their plates have the same surface areas, even though they're a third the size because of all the little donut holes in the mesh. But that counteracts what it should be doing, and a solid plate is critically important. Um, so that's one of the major reasons our machine is better than the knockoff machine.
So
The other
Gordon,
thing now, go ahead.
you brought up a great word, disassociation. So what does that mean when we are creating ionized alkalized water?
Okay, great. So when you look at different molecules, let's just take the water molecule. You've got an oxygen with two hydrogens on it. And if you look at the valence shells, which are the electron shells around the nucleus of an atom, the very first shell can hold two electrons, and then they increase in size. The second shell can hold 8 electrons. Well, if you look at an oxygen molecule, it has 6 electrons. It's got 6 protons, so it'll be in balance with 6 electrons, which means the inner shell is full and the outer shell is got 6 of its 8 capacity. So the other two that are open is what the reason hydrogen will come on over because it has 1 proton, so 1 electron if it's in balance, but its first shell can hold 2, so it tries to share it. It wants to fill it. So it tucks itself up against an oxygen and they go back and forth, sharing the electrons in that second valence shell. But if we now fill all of those valence shells with electrons, so they actually have more electrons than their proton center, then they can't share, so they separate apart. So that's how they start disassociating. So water molecules begin to break down, and the hydrogens come off. We end up with oxygen that is highly negatively charged because it's got an extra 2 electrons in it. If we continue to bombard it, we can actually start filling the third valence shell, and it'll have that many more. It's what creates dimolecular hydrogen because hydrogen would have 1 electron. So if 2 of them are bound together, it would only have 2, but the valence shells could hold 4. So you fill them, it becomes negatively charged, and that's why it is an antioxidant. It also allows it then to bond with um, the most oxidizing product we can have in our system, which is an oxygen atom that's missing electrons. So it starts oxidizing everything it does. That's what free radical damage is. It's stealing electrons from molecules or atoms that are in its proximity. Every time it yanks one of those electrons off, it creates a spark. That's why our bodies have a natural charge of up to 3 volts on 3 to 4 volts. It's because of all of that electrical activity happening um, from free radical damage. But if we have all of these antioxidants, if I got those 2 hydrogens that are full of electrons and I got an oxygen that's missing them, they'll come together, combine, and produce a water molecule, which is great because it can leave the cell, and you neutralize the charge without it having to steal the electron, and you can reduce that electrical output in our system, which could cause some inflammation. So those are some of the things that dissociation will do. But one of the other powerful uh, products that it makes is when you have a single oxygen with one hydrogen on it, because one of them has gotten yanked off, and you have a hydroxyl ion. And what's so important about hydroxyl ions is when they enter the cell, and they're individual, so they've broken themselves down into the individual items. So they get drawn into the cell very, very rapidly. Their electrical charge is stronger, negative charge, than the cell wall that all of this hydrogen stuck to because it's positive, the wall of the cells are negative, so it fills all up. When we add a hydrogen one to a cell, we increase, or to any solution for that matter, we increase its acidity. So when the cell holds on to all of that H1, it increases in acidity. That's the acid waste that comes from metabolizing our food. So when a hydroxyl ion goes into the cell, it can pluck them back off the wall because it has a stronger negative charge. It'll grab them, produce a water molecule, water leaves the cell, and it takes the acid waste with it. That's how we change the cellular pH by adding alkaline water that is positively charged. First of all, very little of it gets in the cell. Second, even if it's in there, because it's positively charged, it repels those hydrogens. It never attaches and pulls them back out. When it leaves the cell, it hasn't changed the pH of the cell. So that's how we change pH with hydroxyl ions, removing the waste. We reduce inflammation with the dimolecular hydrogen, reducing free radical damage. And because we've separated the molecules, they're small enough and they're charged properly to enter the cell, we increase massively our hydration levels and done very quickly. I mean, if somebody drinks tap water or bottled water, they may absorb intercellularly maybe 15% over a 3 to 4 hour period. That, I mean, if somebody's playing ball, the game's over in 3 to 4 hours. All of the water that they lost, none of it got replaced. They're dehydrating rapidly. And for every 10% of every 3%, I'm sorry, of dehydration, we lose 10% of the cell's ability to do work. Now, when we think about an athlete, we think of work for them running and doing all of that. But what happens to their heart's ability to pump, their kidneys to pull stuff out of their blood, all of the lactic acid that's being formed in the cells that is sitting in there because it can't get removed? So that's some of the critical aspects of what happens there.
So along that point, okay, so now we have a water molecule that goes in and it extracts heavy metals, vaccines, pollution all throughout our body. Well,
Yes.
there are lots of people out there claiming that they have a bottle that does the same thing, or they have a tablet they can drop into the water. What's your
Mhm.
thoughts on that, Glenn?
Well, here's the problem with those hydrogen drops or hydrogen bottles that have a magnesium crystal in them that releases magnesium into the water. And the process of that chemical reaction will produce some dimolecular hydrogen. It dissipates rapidly because it's a gas and it's not producing enough to saturate the water like our machine does. Our machine will saturate the water with dimolecular hydrogen, which is why you see the cloudiness when you first make it, because it actually has more in there than can be dissolved into the water. So you're seeing what's being vented off because we've reached saturation level. The other problem with the little magnesium crystal bottles is the magnesium tablet oxidizes rapidly and it builds up magnesium oxide on the outside and then it stops producing. So in a very short period of time, it's useless anyway. But the other thing it's doing is it's producing, for the most part, it's releasing magnesium in the water and it's changing the pH by increasing the mineral content and the mineral content is elemental. It's not ionic minerals. So now you're producing alkaline water, another problem by ingesting all of those elemental minerals. Um, and it's all positively charged still, so it doesn't enter the cell. So even the little bit of dimolecular hydrogen that is produced dissipates off long before it could ever enter the cell and do any good to begin with. So those are, again, just another um, little sales tool that they can sell you something that doesn't do anything that they're saying it'll do. It makes this, but it never gets used in the body like it could or should. So those are useless. And the tablets, or some of them have a little battery that does some ionization, but with so little power, it can't disassociate enough or produce enough to be useful in any way. So those are all just gimmicks.
That's what I assumed. Also, if it did work, whatever water's in the bottle,
Hmm.
then that would be broken down. So even the bad elements would get into us, correct?
That is right, because you're not separating the water into two across a membrane and dumping all of the acid and wastewater. So they can't produce the same kind. They're not producing electrolyzed reduced water. Period. They're producing some hydrogen water a little bit, but again useless because it can't get into the cell, and they're producing alkaline water. Um, the ones with the battery don't even produce alkaline water, so it's they're just they're waste. If anything, they could cause more harm than good. And
That's
the tap water that they're using to make it is full of all of the junk because it hadn't been filtered. Um, in our electrolysis process, a lot of the minerals that our bodies don't use, like fluoride, is a great example. Unfortunately, and hopefully very soon, they're going to stop putting um, chemically produced synthetic fluoride in our water because it is a horrible, uh, it disrupts neurons in our brain so badly. It is so destructive. Um,
horrible toxin for us.
yeah. And so when we ionize the water, it gets drawn off to, so about 95% of it will get drawn into the acid water that's being dumped down the drain, and it doesn't go over to what we drink. So that is a benefit. I use a filter that filters the fluoride out before it ever reaches the machine because I don't want any of it in my body. So, and it takes a specific filter to do that
Yeah,
because the normal filters won't pull that out.
right. Fluoride's its own animal.
Yeah, and
It
it's
creates a
synthetic
unique.
fluoride, so that
Yeah,
even makes it worse. If
yeah,
some of the natural fluoride would dissipate into the machine on the acid side, and wouldn't hardly any of it would get into us, but the synthetic is ridiculous.
absolutely. Yeah. So very good. And so in that, I mean, there's a lot of claims from those other machines, but my understanding is it's platinum that's needed for that disassociation, right? Is that correct?
Oh, well, here's what the platinum does.
Okay.
First of all, if we just had a titanium plate,
Mhm.
you're going to give off little microns of titanium as the machine's ionizing, running electrons through there. Titanium is not something you want in your system. It can be toxic, and I'll tell you a story right after this part of exactly what some of the knockoff machines can do to you. But so you coat it in platinum for two reasons. Number one, platinum, when it dries from either plating it electrically, or if it's even dipped in liquid platinum, which it doesn't. We electroplate the platinum on there because platinum melts at a much higher temperature than the titanium. So in order to plate it by dipping it, you would have to heat the platinum and you'd melt the titanium when you dipped it in there. So that doesn't work. But platinum forms a very, very smooth surface. And that's critical because microscopically, if we had little peaks sitting up on the top of the surface of the plate, the amount of power we're driving through it, we could start little arcs across those two little towers. And then you start corroding. You're basically welding at that point, and you're corroding the metal, which is exactly what happens in the knockoff plates if the power supply doesn't turn off quick enough and you start eating those things up. You start arcing across there. And I've had a friend who bought a machine from us. And so I had done the demonstration, explained everything to him in detail. And he called me about 2 or 3 months after um, he had gotten his machine. And he said that his son who was like 32 years old, had just been rushed to the hospital. They thought he was having a heart attack because he had horrible chest pains. He couldn't breathe hardly. And they got him in the hospital and they said, "You're not having a heart attack, but we don't know what's wrong." Um, and so he called and he said, "Do you have any idea what could be wrong with him?" And he said, "But he is using the other machine. It was a life ionizer he had bought about 6 months ago before I had talked to his dad." And I said, "I guarantee you the plates are beginning to dissolve in there and he's absorbing the titanium. Tell the doctors to test him for titanium toxicity." So they called and said, and the doctor said, "How is he going to get titanium toxicity? That's ridiculous." And they said, "Because of something he's using, testing." Sure enough, that's what he had. And so they chelated it back out of his system and then he was okay. We went and took the machine apart. And when you open the plate, which you can't open like ours, ours can unbolt and you can take it apart. You got to break theirs apart because it's a completely little sealed unit. The plate, the mesh plate, had which was only about this big, right? It had a hole in it the size of the tip of your finger. It had just corroded and eaten away all of it, doing exactly what we just said. It's arcing and dissolving it. So it's dissolving all of that titanium right into the water that he was drinking.
Wow,
So that's another thing to be very careful of with the knockoff models.
and that was only 6 months old.
6 months old, dissolved in the plate.
Wow, isn't that incredible?
High quality product, right?
Twice as good and half the price.
Well, and the other thing they constantly beat us up about is our price, and they want to blame the price not on the cost of the plate, because then that would identify the fact that they're not using the right metals,
Right.
or they would have the same cost. They want to say it's our marketing system. It's a multi-level marketed thing, and that's where all the money's going. But that's completely untrue. And I'll tell you how that relates, because most people don't understand general marketing. Now, I've been in the wine business for 45 years also. If I buy a wine from a manufacturer, a winery in France, for example, I could buy that bottle of wine from them at $3 a bottle. Then it gets excise taxed in France. It gets shipped over here. That's another cost. It has to be brought in by a importer. The importer's got to store the wine, so it's paying facilities to store it when it gets here before he can sell it again. He's going to put his margin on it, 35%, to cover all of that. Then he sells it to wholesalers around the country, because that's the law of how it has to be distributed. He can't sell it direct to the consumer or even to a retailer. So it goes into a wholesaler who then has their margins to put on it. And then it gets sold to the retailer who then margins it again to sell it to the consumer. With that whole process, and we're not even talking about advertising yet at this point, just that part of it. By the time it sells at the retail level, you're going to pay $15 for that bottle of wine. So it's up 5 times the manufacturer's cost. Our machine is slightly over 2 times the manufacturing cost because they don't have all of that. You're directly buying it from them. And the cost that they incur are the manufacturing costs. And then, of course, they ship them to the United States and we pay the shipping from California or wherever it's coming out of, but it's here already. They already paid that to get it here.
Right.
And so with the high cost of the materials in the machine and that, they probably have in a $4,000 machine, they probably have 18 to $1,900 of their cost in there. So it's only twice the amount of what it leaves the manufacturer. Now, if we take life machines, which they're probably renamed because they rename them every few years because of uh, that lifetime warranty that doesn't exist when they go away and they rebrand the thing. Um, the cost of the manufacturing of their machine is about $320. I know the guy who had sold the machine because I went over to him when we took that machine apart and I showed him what his machine was doing to people. He ended up quitting Life. I forget the name, full name, but it was Life something. A Life Ionizer was the name of that company. He ended up quitting it and he bought an Enagic machine. But so I got to talk to him about the details. First of all, they required him to have a storefront, so he had those expenses. In order to get a franchise, he had to buy $65,000 worth of machines. They were selling him the machines at that time, which were probably about 10 years ago, for $450. That was his wholesale cost. And he was selling them for $2,800. What's the margin there, right? But he wants to talk about, not him particularly, but they want to talk about our machines being so expensive and high margins because of the multi-level marketing, and theirs goes from 450 to 2,800. Ours goes from 19 to 4,000. I mean, come on. But those are some of the things they tell people, and is why people back off because they think, oh, well, I can get the same thing from you for a third less than a price. I'll buy it from you if it does the same thing, which we know it doesn't, but they don't know that, and so they bite. So it's just all deceptive marketing
I was going to say
because not one of them have ever gotten down to producing a machine of the quality level of our machine in all of these years. They just keep playing the game.
exactly. I love that. So, your thoughts about the type of container that we put our water in? Now, I know it's best to drink it fresh from the machine. I mean, that's a given, but we can't always drink from the machine. There's we're a going lifestyle. We got to put it in something to go wherever we're
Sure.
going. What's your thoughts on that?
Well, the best container, if we just want to break down what works the best, would be glass. It's going to interact with glass the least. Um, Definitely do not put it in an aluminum bottle because
Mhm.
it'll start oxidizing the aluminum and pulling aluminum into the uh, the water, and then aluminum is another neuro destroyer. So you definitely don't want aluminum in your system. Stop cooking with aluminum pots. It puts aluminum in your food. Um, so from there, stainless steel, a high quality stainless steel would work better. And if you use plastic, and there are some places that are using highly refined non-BHT plastics, then you could get away with that. Now, you can buy glass bottles now that have those rubber sleeves over them, so they're not cracking every time you tap them on something. Those would be the best ones to use. But you can get away with some plastics if you need to, but they have to be chemical free, no BHTs.
And then light's its enemy too, right? So that sleeve would be really good to help guard the light from stealing those electrons.
Yes, that's right. It'll last much longer in glass than it will in other bottles.
Excellent, excellent.
And then put it in small. I mean, if you're gonna, like when I was working in the field all of the time, I'd bring at least a half a gallon of water with me every day. Well, I didn't bring a gallon jug in the car and just keep refilling my bottle because the more space you have in it, the more air that's in there, oxygen's in it, and you're starting to oxidize. So you're using up some of the dimolecular hydrogen. You're drawing it out because you're oxidizing, and what it's basically doing is shutting down the free radicals that are in the air that's in the bottle. So you want the least amount of space in there for a longer period of time. So I always brought it in quart bottles, and I drink 1 quart, the other one's completely full, so there's no airspace in it until I go to it. And I'm drinking enough of it in an 8 hour period that I'm getting it all down before it dissipates.
Excellent, excellent. One other thought about that. Okay, so you're drinking it. What's it doing with your stomach? I hear all sorts of things that, oh man,
Okay.
that's got to be messing up your stomach acid.
No, and here's why it doesn't mess up your stomach. There are two elements that your tissue, whether it be your soft palate in your mouth, your esophagus, or your stomach, can absorb directly into the bloodstream: water and alcohol. Okay, those are the two items. Everything else has to be digested in the stomach, broken down by bacteria in the intestines before it can enter the bloodstream. And so when we drink our water, probably 30% of it is absorbed in the tissue between our mouth and our esophagus before it ever hits our stomach. That's how rapidly it's pulled into our tissue because of its high negative electrical charge and the fact that it's broken down into small molecular form. It gets pulled into the tissue immediately. When it gets into the stomach, it's going to get drawn right into the tissue of the stomach. Now, if you're eating, and that's one of the things people talk about, oh, you're drinking alkaline water, so it's going to dilute the acid in your stomach. But remember, the only reason our water is alkaline is not because we added more alkalizing minerals. It's the same mineral content, actually less because some of them got pulled to the nasty side, as the tap water, which is neutral. So it's not going to change the pH of the stomach because the the lack of H1 is not going to change the acid structure of the stomach because we pulled that out. It's going to have the same amount of minerals, and those minerals are now ionized. So they're not elemental minerals, and they will bond real well with different amino acids and produce different proteins and those kinds of things. So you don't change the pH of the stomach by drinking the water. And a great way to prove that is get somebody who has acid reflux and they've got heartburn. If they took a Tums, they'll knock the heartburn out because that's elemental calcium and it neutralizes the acid in the stomach. But if they drink a glass of Kangen water, it does not get rid of the heartburn. So it didn't neutralize all the acid in the stomach. It's obviously not what it's designed to do. So it is not changing the structure. I don't, I mean, that's all I drink is electrolyzed reduced water and basically iced tea. That is, or I don't say iced tea, because I don't put ice in it. And if I do put ice in it, I have a little machine that makes Kangen ice, by the way. And
Yes.
I don't just use a regular ice machine in the house. I've got a little machine that creates little cubes and it makes it very rapidly. So literally 10 minutes, it'll make a cube, or it's cubes of ice. So we make it, and it takes a little bit of effort because it's makes small amounts at a time, and we put it in bags and we put it in our freezer, and then we have Kangen ice if I need to chill something.
Yeah,
But
we have one of those we got from Sam's Club. You could just pour the water in, it starts running
yeah,
over.
and it
Pretty soon
circulates
it's
around.
producing little ice
Exactly,
cubes. That's
exactly.
perfect though.
Now, just don't, if you have one of those little machines, one of the things they'll say in it is put distilled water in it so that you don't get mineral buildup. Don't do that. You don't want to drink distilled water by any means. But or if you added that ice to your liquid, you're totally ruining it instantly. But I do make tea when I have supper. I make tea, and I just take I drink some roasted dandelion and turmeric ginger tea because the dandelion is so nasty by itself. I mean, it tastes like you're drinking pulpwood or something. Um, but if you add the other tea to it, so I just put a tea bag of each in a glass, fill it with water, and in a matter of a few seconds, I got tea that I drink with my dinner. Get the positive health results from the dandelion and things of that sort because they will help fight cancer and all of those different things. But it doesn't change the pH of the water. It actually doesn't change because I've tested it, it doesn't change the ORP even. So the water still got all of its natural strengths and I get the nutritional benefits from that tea. And I have at least once in the day some flavor in what I have, and not only once. Sometimes I do it more often.
And so you drink. That was another question. You drink water with your meal.
I do,
Yeah, I don't have any issues with acid reflux or anything either. So I
and
drink
I
water with
digest
my
my
meal.
food, and I don't have any heartburn, and I don't have any of those things.
And I've had a few people who do have heartburn issues and such. And I love what you were just saying there. If our water could change the acid in our body,
Hmm.
okay, then it would change a Coca-Cola. But just a shot of Coke will destroy all glass. So if they're comparable, I mean I've had that thought before. It's like if a shot of Coke will destroy a whole pitcher of Kangen water, then how in the world could that little bit of water that you drink destroy your stomach's acid? I mean,
Well, exactly.
that's, I
So
mean, that's very
now the big problem with drinking water that's acidic, which what 90% of our
mm,
bottled waters are all acidic. The
right.
others are alkaline, which is the other problem that we talked about earlier. But what you're doing is you're adding to the acid that has to be neutralized in your system. So you're compounding, overwhelming your buffering system.
Mm,
And then as your cells start building all of this acid up and it stays in them because it's all stuck in there, then you constantly overwhelm the buffering system. It cannot produce enough buffers to do it. It starts prioritizing what it's going to do. And the first thing it's going to do is buffer your blood, because if it doesn't do that, you're going to die. Uh, there's very little variance in what your blood pH needs to be. Uh, so you don't have enough buffers to buffer the acid in the cells, which is why they remain acidic. Now, it tries to, but you also don't have enough buffers to create the buffering system to buffer the stomach back down to neutral from producing all the hydrochloric acid to dissolve your food. Then the buffering, the pancreatic juices have to come in, neutralize that so it can go into the small intestines, open the caloric valve. If it doesn't, then that's why it sits in the stomach for so long, because you don't have enough bufferings to buffer it down when it's ready.
mm.
So then it starts to ferment. And as it ferments, you've seen things that ferment, gas comes off of it, and that is bubbling up through this acid solution in your stomach. And it's the gas that's seeping through the sphincter between the esophagus and the stomach, and that's what's burning your esophagus. And if you are that acidic, over time, your caloric valve will actually start opening a little bit earlier, and it allows some mildly acidic solutions into the intestines that's not designed to do that. And now you've got acid eating and irritating the tissue in your intestine. And you wonder why people end up with irritable bowel syndrome, because they're dumping acid into their intestines and inflaming them to death. And then on top of that, if it lasts long enough, if that's a persistent problem with them, they start deteriorating tissue inside the colon or in the small intestines also, in particular. And then the body, as they deteriorate that tissue and it dies, it starts to putrefy in the walls. The body recognizes it as a foreign matter, and your immune system goes in and starts attacking it, and you end up with Crohn's disease, which is an autoimmune disease attacking uh, bad stuff that's your own decaying tissue. So when you overwhelm the buffering system, you start a series of problems that are coming down the line. In addition to high cell acidity, what grows really well in high acidity and not in a properly balanced alkaline environment? Cancer. Free radical
In
damage produces a cancer cell. It then begins to thrive in an acidic environment.
all degenerative disease, right, thrives in that acidic environment.
Almost
So,
all disease falls into those fall categories. I
so
mean, if you
going
look at
back to
the
the
list of diseases that are caused from acidity, from mild acidity to moderate to extreme, I mean, it's a mile long of stuff that's all caused. So that's why when people start drinking our water, they think, oh, the water's healing me. No, it's getting rid of all the problems you have and allowing your body to catch up and heal itself, not overwhelming it with all of these issues.
I got a couple more things. Okay, so quite another question. Okay, so we talked about at kind of towards the start the bioavailability of those minerals versus elements,
Hmm.
and how does the body buffer the blood, um, or what kind of issue is there when it's elements instead of bioavailability?
Well, there's a number of things. Number one, when you have elemental minerals, they cannot be absorbed and used in chemical reactions throughout the system. Number two, your body doesn't have a mechanism to get them back out. So
Hmm.
then it has to store them somewhere. So if it's calcium, it stores it in the joints. You end up with arthritis. That's what arthritis is. Calcium deposits inside the joint that start eating up the cartilage and all of the inflammation that's caused from that. If it's excess elemental iron, your liver processes it out and you end up with things that can destroy liver tissue with iron. That's where it migrates and holes in. There's other minerals that will end up in your pancreas and stuff and cause other problems um, that harm the organ from producing what it's supposed to. So people end up with, when they're highly acidic, they end up with type 2 diabetes because the pancreas can't produce enough of what it needs, and it's working itself to death trying to produce enough buffers. It doesn't produce enough insulin, and you end up with the diabetic problem. That's an acid-borne disease. You get rid of the acid problem, the diabetes will work itself back out and go away. So
Excellent.
that's not all. When you look at proteins, proteins are built from amino acids. Um, if it's below 50 proteins of I mean 50 amino acids making up, um, then it's not considered a protein. It's called, and I got to think of what it's called. It'll come to me in a second.
Yeah.
Anyway, if it's below 50 amino acids, and then it's a protein if it's above. But all proteins, when it's being put together, um, bond themselves with different minerals because it uses the mineral to catalyze the chemical reactions in our system. That's what makes up the enzymatic activity. And since we are when you look at your chemistry of how chemical reactions take place, there are three ways to produce a chemical reaction. You can put two elements together and they'll just sit there and do nothing. But if you heat them up, they'll interact. You can put them under pressure and they'll interact. And if you're at a constant temperature and a constant pressure, which is what we are, then the only other way to cause the chemical reaction is enzyme activity. And an enzyme is a protein built from that has certain minerals attached to it. Well, those minerals, in order to be built into that protein, have to be ionic. They can't use elemental minerals. So if you're lacking ionic minerals in your system, you're not building collagen, our main protein that is all of the elasticity and connective tissue in all of our body. All of those different proteins don't get produced properly. And enzymes are proteins, and they're necessary to help digest food and all of those different things. So it's critically important to be properly have the proper amount of minerals in your system, but they need to be ionic. Now, when our water is ionized, all the minerals that come over into the drinking side, the calcium, magnesium, it's all the ones that we use. Calcium, magnesium, potassium, I mean, there's a magnesium, all of those, when they ionize them. So what was elemental in the tap water is now ionic minerals in the water we're drinking. So we can use all of them. So you increase your mineral intake. It's the same thing that when salt is in water, the ocean, the earth is the earth's core is pushing electrons up through the earth's surface. You've heard of grounding. If you stand on the ground, you're absorbing electrons right out of the earth. If you're in the ocean, you're in standing on the bottom, you're getting them not only through your bottom of your feet, but all of the water around you is all ionized because of the electrons being pumped up through the earth. So what happens if to a plant, even if it takes up elemental minerals, it electrolyzes them and breaks them down into ionic minerals through photosynthesis, and then bonds them with the protein fibers in the plant so they stay ionic. But when salt water dries out and the salt in it crystallizes, the process of crystallization, all of the minerals that are in that water that's being crystallized into the salt is ionic minerals. So all the minerals that are in the salt remain ionic in their form because they've been bound in the crystalline structure. So if you get, let's say, Celtic salt or Himalayan salt, all of those have over 80 minerals and they're all ionic. You add a little of that to your food, when the salt dissolves and goes, it puts all of those minerals and they are in their ionic state into your food or into put a little bit in your water. If I'm outside in the summertime and I'm going to drink a gallon of water because I'm sweating and I'm hot, I'll put a little pinch of one of those two salts in my water. So as I'm drinking it, I'm getting more and more. Since I'm drinking so much water, you can deplete some of those minerals by washing them out of your system. I'm replacing them as I go. Plus, the water itself is full of some of those minerals. So I'm replacing them by just drinking the electrolyzed reduced water.
Excellent, excellent. So then, one other question that was out there: what about cleaning the machine? What is the true benefit of keeping the machine internally
Okay,
clean?
that's great because as the plates are reassociating the water, no different than your ice machine is another good example.
Okay.
Um, when you freeze that water, and especially some of these ice machines have little cutting grids on them, so that it puts a slab of ice on it, and then it heats up these little wires that
Hmm.
melt the ice and cuts it into little squares or whatever. Well, those cutting plates will end up full of minerals that deposit on them because when they're warm like that, your hot water heater will do the same thing. So as we're electrolyzing the water, you're going to get a buildup of some of those minerals on the plate. And if you cover the surface of the plate with calcium, for example, because it calcifies out and sticks to the plate, then it can't do its job. So you're reducing its effectiveness. So cleaning the machines regularly is critically important. Keeping them clean keeps them producing 100% water versus reducing in quality and strength because most of the plate isn't working because it's covered with stuff.
Wow. Going back to that smooth platinum, the other machines, the other machines really don't even have a cleaning process. But
Right.
even if they did, their plates are so rugged that it actually wouldn't even clean between those points, as you were talking about, where
No, it,
electricity.
it it fills all of those in with debris and calcium and everything else, of magnesium, all of those. Um, and that's a problem because then the plate heats up even more because those minerals don't conduct the electricity as well as the titanium does. So that becomes a heat source. That's why it eventually erodes those spots.
Oh yes,
So that is a
holds the
problem.
heat in, holds the heat
Yeah.
in there so it doesn't dissipate. That's
Yeah.
yes.
Now, the other thing is no matter what kind of bottle you carry your water in,
Uh-huh.
you'll notice after a few days, the bottle surface starts to get a little cloudy, and if you feel it, it's a little rough. And it's because all of these minerals are in their ionic state, and then as they start coming back into their molecular elemental state, as they are losing electrons, they'll start bonding together again. They start sticking to the surface. So it's going to stick to the surface of the plates also. Um, Over time. So that's why you need to clean it and you need to clean your bottles because the rougher they get full of all of that, then you increase the speed at which uh, those
Dissipate.
things come out of the water that you're putting in those dirty bottles. I say dirty, the
Right,
coated bottles. Let me rephrase that.
right,
Um,
right.
so every few days, I always have a bottle sitting there with some white vinegar in it. And we're using different bottles all the time. So I always have one full of that. And within about 5 or 10 minutes, the white vinegar will dissolve all of that out and you'll
Yeah,
have a clean bottle again. So you just keep rotating them around, keep them clean. After a few weeks, dump the vinegar and get some fresh stuff and just keep them nice and clean. And then you'll get the best results from them.
excellent, excellent. Man, this has been what a great hour this has been. Getting together with you today again. Just it's always such a pleasure to have you, and always good
Well,
to
I
see we
appreciate
hit the
it.
top of
Always willing to come and help in any way I can.
we hit the top of the hour. Is there anything else that you want to throw out there, Glenn? That as we close, anything you want to tell our difference makers out here?
Well, I think learning these things allows you to counteract some of the problems when you get all of these objections.
Mhm.
You have answers to show people. And when you show them and explain it to them, then they get it. And then they won't fall for the deceptive marketing that these other people use.
Amen. That's so
So,
good.
you know, one of the things I learned a long time in sales, there's what they refer to as the used car salesman. They'll tell you anything that they think will get you to go their way, even if it's not true or it's only partially true because you don't understand the rest of it. Or when I was in sales, my whole thought process was educate the people about the facts of what you're talking about so that they can have a an understanding to make a rational, educated decision. And so I've always approached everything that way is start with a base of education so that you know that they understand what you're talking about. They won't fall for all the other nonsense because they know better by then and they'll understand what you're discussing. And it increases the value of what you're talking about too, because if they understand what it's really doing for them, then it becomes far more valuable, and the price relationship isn't such a disaster. Because consider what you're paying at the doctor's office compared to
Oh, yeah.
what you're paying for your machine. It'll
Yeah.
get paid for in a hurry, and you'll feel a lot better along the way.
Yeah, I just heard someone went in the other day to the hospital. $41,000 for that day. $41,000 was not even admitted,
Yeah.
and it was $41,000 for that day. And it was, oh man, it's just absolutely incredible. But
Well,
anyway,
you wonder why insurance is so through the roof?
that's right. That's right. So invest in your health assurance by getting by getting a
Yeah.
device, and
Avoid the problem,
that's right.
then you don't have to suffer the ramifications of the problem, and you actually spend less money along the way.